Earth received the signal on a quiet Tuesday morning in 2150. It came from deep space, beyond the orbit of Pluto, a pattern too regular to be natural. At first, only a handful of radio astronomers noticed it, but within hours, every major observatory had redirected their equipment toward the source. Olivia Ford rubbed her tired eyes, staring at the data scrolling across her monitor. As the lead scientist at NASA's Deep Space Communications Center, she had seen plenty of unusual cosmic phenomena, but nothing like this. "It's definitely artificial," she said to her colleague, Jack Bennett, a military advisor assigned to the center after rumors of the signal leaked to the public. "The pattern repeats exactly every 94.3 seconds. Jack leaned over her shoulder, his brow furrowed. "Any progress on decryption?" "Some. We've identified what appear to be mathematical constants, pi, the square root of 2. Universal language stuff." She pulled up another screen. "But there's something else embedded in the signal, something like instructions." For weeks, Olivia's team worked around the clock. Government officials arrived daily, their faces growing more concerned as the true nature of the message became clear. The signal contained detailed information about a vast interstellar civilization called the Saltarian Empire, along with technical specifications that seemed to be intended to help Earth prepare. "They're warning us," Olivia explained to the emergency United Nations Council that had gathered in New York. "The Saltarians aren't sending this message. It's from another species called the Mirians." Jack stepped forward, displaying images decoded from the signal. "According to this, the Saltarians have conquered hundreds of worlds. The Mirians are one of many enslaved species. They're risking everything to warn us that Earth has been identified and catalogued for future acquisition." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. 3 months later, humanity got its first visual confirmation. A small spacecraft entered Earth orbit, its design unlike anything humans had conceived. The vessel carried 5 Mirian representatives, slender beings with pale blue skin and large expressive eyes. Through hastily assembled translation devices, the Mirian's leader, designated as speaker, addressed Earth's representatives. "We come in secret. The Saltarians monitor this sector irregularly. We estimate you have perhaps 3 decades before they return in force." "What do they want with us?" asked the UN Secretary General. "Labor, resources, your planet. The Saltarians collect species like artifacts. They take what they want and leave the rest in ruins." Olivia noticed how the Mirians trembled when speaking of their masters. Their fear was palpable, their bodies bearing scars that hinted at harsh treatment. "Can we negotiate with them?" Jack asked. Speaker made a sound that the translator interpreted as bitter laughter. "The Empire does not negotiate. It consumes." The Mirians didn't stay long. They left behind technology, faster-than-light communication devices, shield designs, weapon schematics, along with star charts marking Saltarian patrol routes and weaknesses in their defenses. "We cannot openly help you," Speaker explained before departing. "But perhaps you can do what we could not. Perhaps humans will be different." In the months that followed, Earth's nations set aside their differences for the first time in history. Old enemies became allies, pooling resources and knowledge. The Terran Defense Alliance was formed under a single mandate: prepare humanity for the coming storm. Olivia and Jack found themselves at the center of this transformation, working with scientists and military strategists from around the world. Private corporations redirected their research toward space technology. Underground facilities were constructed to develop vessels capable of interstellar travel. As their ship disappeared into the darkness, Speaker transmitted one final message: "We will watch for your arrival among the stars. If any species can break the Empire, it may be yours." 30 years passed. Deep beneath the surface of Mars, Fleet Admiral Henry Martinez walked through the massive underground shipyard. The ceiling soared hundreds of feet above him, accommodating the enormous vessels under construction. Workers in specialized suits moved like ants across the skeletal frames of warships. "Status report. Henry said to the woman walking beside him. Chief Engineer Kate Walsh nodded, her red hair tucked under a safety helmet. The TDA Relentless will be ready for final testing next week. That brings our total to 27 capital ships and 43 support vessels. Henry nodded, pride mingling with anxiety. For 3 decades, Earth had poured its resources into this secret fleet. The public knew only that humanity was preparing, but the true scale of the operation remained hidden, even from most government officials. And the Mirian technology? He asked. We've improved on it, Kate replied, leading him to a large testing chamber. Inside, technicians surrounded a device the size of a car engine. Their shield generators were efficient, but we've doubled the output while reducing the power requirements by 30%. A test began. The generator hummed to life, creating a shimmering bubble that repelled a barrage of energy weapons. The readings on nearby screens showed minimal power drain. Impressive, Henry said. And weapons? Kate's expression turned grim. The particle cannons are ready. One shot can disable a vessel the size of our early estimates of Celtarian cruisers. In another section of the Mars facility, Intelligence Officer Daniel Patterson sorted through the latest transmissions from their deep space probes. The small, stealthy devices had been sent out years ago, traveling far beyond the solar system to gather information about the enemy they would soon face. The images on his screen showed worlds stripped of resources, populations working in vast mining operations. Some planets appeared completely abandoned, their surfaces scarred by massive extraction efforts. They're worse than we thought, Daniel murmured to himself, forwarding the most disturbing findings to the Admiral's secure channel. Later that day, Henry called a meeting of the fleet's senior staff in the Central Command Center. The room was filled with the best minds Earth had to offer: scientists, military leaders, and specialists from dozens of fields. The Celtarians have conquered or destroyed at least 300 more worlds since our first warning, Henry announced, displaying Daniel's findings. Their empire now spans nearly a quarter of the galaxy. The room remained silent as images of suffering appeared on the main screen. Beings of all descriptions laboring under harsh conditions, worlds turned to wastelands. But we've also received good news, Henry continued. Our long-range communication with the Mirian resistance is paying off. They've established a network of allies who are waiting for our arrival. A star chart appeared, showing a complex series of routes through Celtarian space. Red dots marked enemy strongholds, while green highlighted potential allies. The Mirians never believed they could defeat the Empire alone, Daniel added. But they'd been preparing for decades, waiting for someone who could lead a real resistance. In the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, the ships of humanity's fleet gathered one by one as they completed their trials. Hidden from Earth and any possible observation from deeper space, they assembled in formation, their hulls gleaming in the distant sunlight. Kate stood at a viewport on the flagship, the TDA Defiance, watching as another vessel took its place in the gathering armada. Will it be enough? She asked quietly. Henry didn't answer immediately. After 30 years of preparation, the moment of truth approached. It has to be, he finally said. We launch in 3 days. Through secure channels, a message spread throughout the hidden fleet. Operation Thunderstrike is a go. May God have mercy on us all, because the Celtarians will not. The fleet departed Earth's solar system on July 4, 2183. No celebration marked their exodus, only a solemn ceremony aboard the flagship TDA Defiance as Captain Susan Miller addressed the crew. For 30 years, we've prepared for this moment, she said, her voice carrying through the ship's communication system and across the fleet. We carry with us the hopes of Earth and countless worlds suffering under Celtarian rule. Lieutenant Commander Alan Phillips stood beside her, his tall frame rigid with attention. As her executive officer, he had trained with Susan for 5 years. Now, as the Defiance led 26 other capital ships into the unknown, he felt the weight of their mission press down on him. Course plotted through the Carina Arm, he reported after the ceremony. First stop is the Marian outpost at HD 93,129. Estimated arrival: 42 days. Susan nodded, staring at the main view screen as the ships engaged their faster-than-light drives. The stars stretched into brilliant lines of light before the view shifted to the artificial tunnel of compressed space that humans had learned to create using Marian technology. The journey began smoothly. Crews settled into their routines, running drills and fine-tuning systems that had never been tested outside Earth's solar system. In the recreation areas, off-duty personnel played games or shared meals, their conversations inevitably turning to families left behind and the uncertain future ahead. On the 18th day, the fleet encountered its first challenge. The Defiance shuddered violently, throwing personnel against walls and consoles. "Report," Susan shouted, pulling herself back into her command chair. "Unknown spatial disturbance," Alan replied, wiping blood from a cut on his forehead. "It's like nothing in the Marian charts." The phenomenon appeared on sensors as a swirling mass of energy, stretching across their planned route. Susan ordered the fleet to halt while science teams studied the barrier. "It's some kind of quantum storm," said the chief science officer after hours of analysis. "Natural, but dangerous. Our shields would fail within minutes of exposure." Susan ordered a course change, adding 12 days to their journey, but avoiding the deadly anomaly. The decision saved the fleet but had unexpected consequences. On the 25th day, sensors detected approaching vessels. "Configuration matches Saltarian patrol ships," Alan announced, his voice tense. 3 light cruisers on an intercept course. Susan called the fleet to battle stations. This engagement wasn't planned, not so early in their mission, but they had prepared for such a possibility. "Deploy to Formation Delta," she ordered. "All weapons hot but hold fire until my command." The human ships moved with precision, spreading into a 3-dimensional pattern designed to trap enemies in a crossfire. The Saltarian vessels continued their approach, apparently confident in their superiority over the unknown ships. "They're hailing us," Communications Officer Lisa Jordan reported. "On screen," Susan replied. The view screen displayed a humanoid figure with scaled golden skin and eyes that shone like polished metal. It spoke in its own language, the ship's computer translating. "Unidentified vessels, you have entered Saltarian space. Surrender immediately or be destroyed." Susan stood, straightening her uniform. "This is Captain Susan Miller of the Terran Defense Alliance. We do not recognize Saltarian authority and will not surrender." The alien commander's eyes narrowed. "Terran, you are unknown to us. Your ignorance will be your undoing." The transmission cut off abruptly. Moments later, the Saltarian ships opened fire. "All ships, return fire," Susan ordered calmly. The human fleet responded with devastating precision. Particle beams sliced through the lead Saltarian vessel, cutting it in half before its shields could fully engage. The other 2 ships managed to raise their defenses, but found themselves caught in the carefully planned crossfire. When the brief battle ended, all 3 enemy vessels were drifting, disabled, or destroyed. Alan looked at the tactical display with mixed feelings of pride and concern. "They'll know we're coming now," he said quietly. Susan nodded. "Plot a new course through the Carina Nebula. We need to mask our approach as long as possible." The fleet altered course, diving into the colorful gases of the nebula, temporarily hidden from Saltarian sensors, but aware that the element of surprise was now lost. The human fleet emerged from the Carina Nebula 3 weeks later, their hulls coated with colorful stellar dust. The ship's systems had struggled against the nebula's radiation, but Chief Engineer Kate Walsh's modifications had held. Now they entered a region of space marked on Marian charts as the Borderlands, territory contested between the Saltarian Empire and several semi-independent species. "Sensor contact," Alan reported from his station on the Defiance's bridge. "Multiple vessels approaching from the 4th planet in this system." Captain Susan Miller studied the tactical display. "Configuration: not Saltarian. Design appears similar to vessels in our database labeled as Tyrellian. Susan remembered the briefings. The Tyrellians were one of the few species that had maintained limited autonomy within the Empire's sphere of influence, primarily because their homeworld contained rare minerals that Celtarians needed. "Open a channel," she ordered. The view screen displayed a being with pale green skin and large almond-shaped eyes. Intricate patterns of bioluminescent dots pulsed across its face. "Unknown fleet," the alien said in halting English, surprising everyone on the bridge. "You enter Tyrellian space. State purpose." Susan stepped forward. "I am Captain Miller of the Terran Defense Alliance. We come from Earth with peaceful intentions toward your people." The Tyrellian's eyes widened. "Earth, the prophesied ones." Diplomat William Grant was summoned to the bridge. Tall and slender with a calming presence, he had studied all available information about potential allies. "The Mirians must have spread word of our coming," William whispered to Susan before addressing the Tyrellian. "We seek alliance against our common oppressor. May we meet to discuss terms." Hours later, William sat in a conference room aboard a Tyrellian vessel. The alien delegation watched him with a mixture of hope and suspicion. "For generations, we have paid tribute to the Empire," explained the Tyrellian leader, who called himself Speaker of Tides. "We mine our world for them, give them our children for their wars, and in return, they allow us to exist." William nodded sympathetically. "Earth wishes to end this cycle of oppression. We have technology and strategies that can help free your people." "Others have made such claims," Speaker of Tides replied. "All have failed." "We've already destroyed 3 Celtarian patrol ships," William countered. "Our fleet carries weapons they have never encountered." The meeting lasted for days. Eventually, the Tyrellians agreed to a tentative alliance. They offered navigation data, intelligence on Celtarian fleet movements, and 6 of their own warships to join the human fleet. Word spread quickly. As the combined fleet traveled deeper into the borderlands, they were approached by vessels from the Vosh, insectoid beings, who controlled a small cluster of stars, and later by the Nebulans, gas-based entities who inhabited the upper atmospheres of gas giants. Dr. Natalie Brooks, the fleet's chief medical officer, found herself overwhelmed with information as each new species came aboard for diplomatic talks. "The Celtarians have a biological weakness," she reported after studying data provided by the Nebulans. "Their neural systems are highly sensitive to specific frequencies of ultraviolet radiation. With modification, our weapons could target their nervous systems directly." Meanwhile, communications specialist Ryan Cooper worked to integrate the communication systems of their growing alliance. "It's incredible," he told Susan during a staff meeting. "Each of these species has been fighting alone, thinking they were the only ones resisting. With a unified communication network, they can coordinate for the first time." The Allied fleet grew to over 50 vessels of various designs and capabilities. Hope spread like wildfire among crews who had known only subjugation. Not everyone welcomed the humans, however. During a diplomatic reception aboard the Defiance, Security Chief Eric Summers noticed a Vosh representative accessing restricted computer terminals. "We may have a spy," he warned Susan privately. "Someone is transmitting data to an unknown location." Susan's face hardened. "Find them." "The Celtarians can't learn our full strength or plans yet." As Eric launched his investigation, the fleet received a transmission from a nearby system. A group of Marian resistance fighters requested immediate extraction, claiming they had critical information about Celtarian fleet movements and warnings about a massive Imperial response already being assembled. The Celtarian High Command gathered in their immense council chamber on the Imperial capital world of Zelt Prime. 12 golden-scaled figures sat around a circular table, their metallic eyes gleaming under the harsh light. "These reports are troubling," said Supreme Commander Vexthar, the eldest and most decorated of the group. "A fleet of unknown design has destroyed 3 of our patrol vessels and appears to be gathering our subject races." Another council member waved a dismissive hand. "Patrol ships are insignificant. This has happened before. Some minor rebellion that will be crushed like all others. Perhaps, Vexthar agreed reluctantly. But the witnesses described technology we have not encountered. And the destruction was efficient. On the holographic display at the center of the table, images of the destroyed Saltarian vessels rotated slowly. Clean cuts showed where particle beams had sliced through hulls designed to withstand conventional weapons. "Who are they?" asked another counselor. "They call themselves humans, from a planet named Earth. We cataloged them 30 cycles ago for future acquisition. A primitive world, barely achieving local space travel when assessed." The council fell silent, processing this information. Finally, Vexthar spoke again. "Dispatch the 7th Fleet to investigate, but make no other adjustments to our forces. If these humans prove troublesome, we will deal with them appropriately." Thousands of light years away, Fleet Commander Gregory Howard led a daring raid against a Saltarian outpost in the Rigel system. 3 human destroyers and 4 Tyrellian attack ships emerged from hyperspace directly above the orbital station. "All ships, execute Plant Thunderstrike," Gregory ordered from the bridge of the TDA Indomitable. "Disable their communications first, weapons second. No survivors can be permitted to escape and warn others." The Allied ships struck with precision. The station's communication array exploded in a shower of debris before alarms could even sound. Particle beams targeted weapon emplacements next, melting them into useless slag. "Boarding teams ready," reported his second-in-command. Gregory nodded. "Proceed with extraction of intelligence data. You have 15 minutes before demolition charges are set." This was the 4th such raid in 2 weeks. Each strike followed the same pattern. Appear suddenly, disable communications, extract valuable intelligence, and vanish before reinforcements could arrive. The tactic was taking a psychological toll on Saltarian forces across 3 sectors. On the TDA Defiance, tactician Laura Chen refined a strategy that was confusing Saltarian sensor networks. "I call it scattered thunder," she explained to Captain Susan Miller, pointing to a simulation on her display. "We split our forces into smaller groups, each striking simultaneously at different targets. Their sensors can't distinguish between actual attacks and decoys because we're jamming their long-range communications." Susan studied the simulation with approval. "And this is why they can't determine our actual numbers or capabilities." "Exactly. They see us everywhere and nowhere. Their response is uncoordinated because each local commander thinks they're dealing with an isolated incident." The strategy was working better than anyone had expected. Across 12 star systems, former slave worlds were beginning to rise up against their oppressors, encouraged by news of successful raids against previously untouchable Saltarian installations. But the success couldn't last forever. On Zelt Prime, Supreme Commander Vexthar received the latest reports with growing fury. The 7th Fleet had found nothing but debris where they expected to encounter the human forces. Meanwhile, reports of attacks continued to flood in from across the Empire. "This is no minor rebellion," he snarled, smashing a fist onto the council table. "This is coordinated warfare, and we have been complacent." The council chamber erupted in angry debate. Some councilors demanded immediate, overwhelming response. Others urged caution, fearing a trap. Finally, the Emperor himself spoke, silencing all others. His scales shimmered with an almost blinding golden light, his eyes like twin supernovae. "I have ruled 10,000 worlds for 5 centuries, he said, his voice cold and precise. "No species has ever truly challenged our dominion. These humans have committed the ultimate transgression. They have given our property hope." The Emperor rose from his throne, towering over the council. "Dispatch the Imperial Armée, all of it. I want these humans and their allies exterminated. And when we find their homeworld, I will personally oversee its dissolution." Across the galaxy, the massive Saltarian war machine began to move. Thousands of warships, including the planet-killer dreadnoughts never before deployed against a single enemy, converged on the rebellion's last known coordinates. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine the fate of countless worlds. The human-led alliance gathered near the Mirian homeworld, a once beautiful planet now scared by centuries of Celtarian mining operations. The fleet had grown to nearly 200 vessels, human warships alongside Tyrellian cruisers, Vosh fighters, and ships from a dozen other liberated worlds. Captain Susan Miller stood on the bridge of the TDA Defiance, studying tactical displays with her senior officers. "The Celtarians are coming in force," Alan Phillips said, pointing to the long-range sensor data. "Our scouts report over 1,000 vessels, including 5 dreadnoughts." Susan's expression remained calm, though her eyes betrayed concern. As expected, they wouldn't take our challenge lightly. The Alliance had chosen this location carefully. The Mirian system offered strategic advantages, a dense asteroid belt that could provide cover, and a complex network of rebel forces on the planet below ready to rise up at the right moment. "All ships report ready, Captain," Communications Officer Lisa Jordan announced. Susan nodded. "Initiate Operation Liberation. All vessels to battle positions." Throughout the fleet, crews moved with practiced efficiency. Shield generators hummed to full power. Weapon systems charged. Fighter squadrons prepared for launch. "The Imperial Armada will arrive in 3 hours," Ellen reported. "They're taking the direct approach, no attempt at subtlety." "They don't think they need it," Susan replied. "And that's their first mistake." The human fleet deployed according to the battle plan developed by Laura Chen. Smaller vessels took positions within the asteroid belt. Capital ships formed a defensive perimeter around the planet. Special teams landed on the Mirian surface to coordinate with resistance fighters. As the minutes ticked down, engineer Kate Walsh made final adjustments to the Defiance's systems. "I've rerouted additional power to the forward shields," she told Susan. "They should hold against even the dreadnought weapons, at least for a while." "How long is a while?" Susan asked. Kate's expression was grim. "Maybe 5 minutes of sustained fire. That's all we need." The Celtarian fleet arrived precisely as predicted, emerging from hyperspace in a display of overwhelming power. Their warships, shaped like elongated pyramids with sleek, golden hulls, stretched across the view screen in seemingly endless numbers. "They're hailing us," Lisa reported. The face of Supreme Commander Vexthar appeared on screen. "Humans, you have interfered in affairs beyond your comprehension. Surrender now, and your species may be permitted to serve the Empire rather than face extinction." Susan stepped forward. "We understand perfectly what's at stake, Commander. Humanity does not surrender to tyrants, and neither will any free world after today." Vexthar's metallic eyes narrowed, then witnessed the price of defiance. The transmission ended, and immediately, the Celtarian fleet unleashed a barrage of energy weapons. The space between the fleets lit up with destructive power. The human shields held, absorbing the initial assault with technology the Celtarians had never encountered. Then the Alliance returned fire, their particle beams striking with precision at predetermined targets. Fighter squadrons launched from both sides. Among them was Raptor Squadron, led by pilot Amy Rodriguez. Her voice was steady as she directed her 12 fighters toward the Celtarian flagship. "Remember the plan," she told her pilots. "We're not aiming to destroy, just to deliver the package." Her fighters weaved through the chaos of battle, taking hits but pressing forward. 3 were destroyed in the initial exchange, their pilots lost in silent explosions. Aboard the Defiance, Communications Officer Peter Jenkins worked frantically to break into the Celtarian battle network. "I've almost got it," he told Susan, his fingers flying across his console. "Their encryption is complex, but their patterns are predictable." The battle raged for hours. Alliance ships fell to Celtarian weapons, but they exacted a heavy toll in return. The human shields and weapons proved more effective than even their own engineers had predicted. Then came the turning point. Amy's squadron reached the Celtarian command ship and deployed their package, a specially designed computer virus delivered via targeted EMP bursts. Simultaneously, Peter broke through the enemy communications encryption. "I'm in," he shouted, broadcasting false orders now. Across the battlefield, Celtarian vessels began receiving contradictory commands. Some retreated from phantom threats. Others fired on their own allies. On the Mirian surface below, thousands of slaves rose up at the predetermined signal, seizing control of crucial facilities and turning planetary defense systems against their former masters. The Celtarian formation began to fragment as confusion spread through their ranks. Supreme Commander Vexthar watched in disbelief as his perfect battle plan collapsed into chaos. "What is happening?" he demanded of his officers. "Restore communications, re-establish control." But it was too late. The seemingly invincible Imperial Armada, pride of the Celtarian Empire, was coming apart at the seams. The Imperial Armada broke apart like a shattered mirror. Ship after ship either surrendered, fled, or was destroyed. When the massive Celtarian flagship finally went dark, its systems overloaded by the combined assault of human weapons and Mirian sabotage, a cheer erupted across the Alliance fleet. On the bridge of the TDA Defiance, Captain Susan Miller allowed herself a small smile, the first in many hours of tense combat. "Status report," she called out, her voice hoarse from issuing commands. Alan Phillips looked up from his console, his face streaked with sweat and grime from a console fire that had been quickly extinguished. "Alliance casualties at 27%, Captain. Celtarian forces in full retreat from this sector. The Mirian resistance reports control of major cities across the planet. And the Emperor's vessel, disabled but intact. Their life support systems are functioning." Susan nodded. "Prepare a boarding party. I want that ship secured." News of the victory spread across subspace channels. On worlds that had suffered for centuries under Celtarian rule, beams of all descriptions gathered around communication devices, scarcely believing what they heard. The seemingly invincible empire had been defeated in open battle. In the days that followed, Captain Frank Wilson of the TDA Resolute took charge of diplomatic efforts. With a background in international law before joining the fleet, he was uniquely qualified to help shape what would come next. "We're not here to replace one empire with another," he explained to representatives from dozens of formerly subjugated worlds. "Earth proposes a galactic coalition, equal representation, mutual defense, and shared technology." The negotiations were complex. Some wanted revenge against the Celtarians. Others feared creating a power vacuum that would lead to chaos. Through it all, Frank maintained a steady vision of cooperation. On the Mirian homeworld, engineer Nicole Harrison led teams helping to dismantle the massive mining operations that had scared the planet. Her expertise in environmental restoration, originally developed to heal Earth's climate, found new purpose. "This soil can recover," she told a group of Mirian children who had never seen plants grow in their native land. "See these seedlings. They're already taking root. In 10 years, this valley will be green again." The children's eyes widened with wonder. Many had never seen the color green outside of ancient pictures. Throughout former imperial space, similar scenes played out. Human doctors treated conditions that Celtarian masters had never bothered to address. Engineers helped rebuild infrastructure designed for freedom rather than exploitation. Teachers shared knowledge that had been deliberately withheld. 6 months after the Great Battle, a ceremony was held in orbit above the Mirian homeworld. A massive space station, constructed from parts of dismantled Celtarian warships, served as the headquarters for the new galactic coalition. Representatives from 87 worlds gathered in the central chamber. Among them were humans, Mirians, Torellians, Vosh, Nebulans, and even a small delegation of Celtarians who had opposed the Empire's brutality. Susan Miller, now Admiral of the Coalition Fleet, stood at the podium, looking out at the diverse gathering. "Today, we remember those who didn't live to see this moment," she began, her voice carrying through the chamber. Humans who left Earth knowing they might never return. Myrians who kept hope alive through centuries of oppression. Beings of all kinds who died believing in freedom. A wall behind her displayed thousands of names, the fallen from the campaign that had changed the galaxy. Their sacrifice created something unprecedented. Susan continued. Not an empire built on fear, but a coalition founded on respect and mutual aid. After the ceremony, Susan stood at a viewport with Alan, looking down at the Myrian world below. Already, patches of green were visible where restoration efforts had begun. Do you think it will last? Alan asked quietly. Susan watched as ships of various designs moved peacefully through space around them. Vessels that months earlier would have been enemies now working together. Nothing is guaranteed, she replied. But we've given them something the Empire never did. What's that? Susan smiled, thinking of Earth, billions of miles away but forever changed by its first steps into a larger community. Choice. The freedom to determine their own future. That's worth protecting. Below them, the former slave world continued its slow healing as night fell across its surface. And across the galaxy, worlds that had known only darkness began to experience the first light of a new dawn.